My name is Claudia Green, and this is She Did That, the podcast shining a spotlight on remarkable women who are breaking barriers and proving that greatness knows no gender. From female founders who have raised millions of pounds, the investors changing the landscape as we know it, to survivors of tragedy who have achieved the amazing and many more. We will share the stories of these incredible women who will inspire and empower you. In order to support us and these women, please subscribe on your viewing or listening channel of choice so we can continue our mission of sharing the stories that should and need to be heard. Today, I have Nicole Mazza, who is the co-founder and chief commercial officer of Relay Technologies. They are looking to disrupt the e-commerce delivery industry in a very, very exciting way. Actually, when you hear her talk about it, you will suddenly become very excited about what it means and the process it goes through to receive your parcels. I'm very excited to introduce Nikki. Thank you so much for being here, Nikki.
Thank you for having me.
We have worked together before, so I know a little bit about you, but I would love to share a little bit of history about you. And I think it's always important to have the context of where Nikki came from. Obviously, I know that you had a really interesting childhood because you moved around. Give me the highlights.
Yeah, okay. So I'm half Italian, half American, grew up in Frankfurt, Germany for most of my life, but then moved to the UK about 12 years ago. So I'd say UK is now my home. And yeah, London primarily. So always been here for the past 2 years.
Okay, so very multicultural. And in terms of your career, did you know what you wanted to do originally? First job?
Yeah, I thought I thought maybe I'd be a good lawyer. And so I decided to do one of my sandwich years working abroad in a law firm. And that's when I realized how I would never be able to become a lawyer because it was so quiet where everybody would just do their individual work. And I'm naturally a team player. Yeah. I've done sports all my life, so I never thought I'd be one of those people that would just sit down and spend most of the time actually reading documents by themselves throughout the day. So that's when I learned what I didn't want to do. And once graduating from university, that's when most people in my class would actually wanted to go on and do a master. So that's when I said, actually, let's start looking at jobs. And that's where I thought, okay, what about the startup world, which back in the day was actually starting to have a big profile, especially in tech. And I tried to think about how do I mix what I really love and enjoy doing in my personal life, which is travel, with a job. And that's where I stumbled into Hotel Tonight, which is recently during the pandemic actually been acquired by Airbnb. But what we would do at the time is sell on-demand hotel rooms. So on the day. Then the scope started expanding out and you went from selling on demand, so the last few hours of the day, distressed hotel rooms. It then started extending, becoming on the day of, then started being a few days prior, a week prior, and now it's multiple months ahead of the most luxurious, boutique, hip, charming type of rooms. So that's the first time I was really exposed to the startup world. And the thing I love the most is that once you joined, you thought you were joining for something very specific, but because you join a high growth startup, your scope actually expands really quickly. And that's when you start having to wear multiple hats and starting to be a builder. And that's when I realized, okay, I really like that building stage, those foundational pillars that you need to build, where every day looks completely different. Every day is a completely new challenge. And you have to be really solutions oriented because you need to find creative ways to readjust what you need to do because things end up not going your way or your planned way every time.
Yeah, I think it's like definitely a type of personality that works in a startup because you haven't got the structure. It's quite chaotic, as you know.
Exactly.
A different problem can come up every day. And I think some people just really like structure and being told exactly what they need to do, particularly grads. So it's unusual that you went straight into an environment like that when a lot of, not all, but a lot of graduates want to go into, a structured program where they're told
you know what you're going to do at every stage and how to evolve.
Yeah. Okay. So you were there for how long?
So about 2.5 years, grew within that. And then I was presented with the opportunity to join Stewart. Stewart Delivery. And that was back in late 2015.
Oh, so like the very early days of
So I was
Stewart.
number 2 on the ground in Stewart in the UK. So that was really, really exceptional opportunity to grow within that business. And the first few years were actually slow. But then all of a sudden we hit the right growth trajectory. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves with my co-founder of today at Relay, building a business from 0 to 400 million in revenue and profitable in under 5 years. And that's, I think, a trajectory that not many people have the luxury to go through. And I say luxury because that's really what enabled us to build so much of our foundational knowledge and understanding of all the things that you need to iterate on to really build something from scratch. And yes, at Stewart, we weren't there from day 0, meaning having to build the first employee contract, the first HR tool. There was already something in place because, we were about 30 at the time in the business. But still, you've seen those foundational layers that you need to build to scale a company to that size.
So what was your remit at Stewart? Well, originally, and then what did you work your way up to?
Right. So look, I started as the first salesperson on the ground. So it was really just me trying to sign on different kinds of businesses, all the way from restaurants to grocers to retailers. And then we grew out the team and slowly then became the head of sales, then quickly jumped into then the commercial director. So overseeing anything from marketing to your new business functions. So sales all the way through to the account management team and revenue operations. So that's where I spent the last 2.5 years at Stewart.
And that's where you met your now co-founder,
Jonathan. Yeah.
And what function was he in the business?
So he actually started on the operational team as an ops manager. So the beauty was that both him and I had the opportunity to grow side by side really quickly. So I was on the commercial side of the org and he was on the operational side, and then quickly went from, being an ops manager all the way to becoming the head of operations, and then later becoming the general manager in the UK, where I would report into that as well. So that's
JJ
how we met.
Was your boss?
Exactly. So for the last period, I reported into Jonathan, and I think what really helped us, that built that relationship that ultimately led us to launch and plunge into Relay together, is that ultimately, we ended up working side by side in the trenches for 6 years, working through all kinds of obstacles and challenges and wins throughout the years that pushed us to think about Relay together.
Yeah, I think when you're choosing a co-founder, a lot of people are having to choose a co-founder. Obviously, yours kind of naturally came together, but people often say that it's really hard because it's like a marriage. You spend most of your time more time with that person than you do with your partner. And you have to solve the same, if not more, problems with them. But I think in your scenario, it definitely helped that you guys knew how each other worked.
Very much so.
And so where did because we're going to segue into Relay, but day one idea, did someone just have lunch? Are you having lunch? And did someone just say, hey, why don't we start a company?
No, it was, it was almost like a mini light bulb moment when at Stewart, back in 2017, so just 1.5 years into our operations, we were actually acquired by GeoPost, owned by the French Post Office. So ownership is within DPD Group. So we became, as Stewart, the sister company, in essence, to DPD.
Right.
Which gave us unique insights into, on one hand, operate our core model at Stewart, which was on-demand, same-day deliveries, where we would have a fleet of on-demand couriers which would collect hyper-locally from restaurants, grocers, or retailers, and then deliver within a perimeter from those locations. So we really nailed that model and, built out a fleet to 25,000 weekly active couriers, which is incredible in the UK. That's a big fleet. Yeah. If you compare that to a DPD, for instance, that does 400 million parcels a year, they have 13,000 weekly active couriers and have been operating for 50 years.
Yeah.
So that gives you a sense of how scalable this new on-demand world that we've just recently discovered in recent years can be. So we've really nailed that. But thanks to that acquisition by DPD Group, we also gained unique insights into how the incumbents, how we call them the dinosaurs of today, are actually powering the 1 to 5 day delivery that we know of, right? Yeah. And so looking at these two models, we realized that actually to power the future of e-commerce, where so many things have changed and transformed in recent years, the way we think about, TikTok emerging, the Vinted of this world with re-commerce. So much has changed in our delivery expectations. The way we expect a burger to be delivered in 30 minutes and your weekly grocery shop now in 10. How has retail delivery in e-commerce drifted so far apart? It's because the incumbents networks of the FedExes, the UPSs, the Everys, the DPDs of this world weren't built for e-commerce. They were built to restock stores, to bring a few Nike hoodies to a few Nike stores, not to deliver to millions of households. So we thought about this and said, well, what's the most advanced e-commerce market in the world? And we turned to China and looked at, what's China doing to power 100 billion parcels a year? They must be doing something different or right. And so we dissected it and looked at it and said, wow, okay, so these guys are actually bringing a bit of the best of both worlds together. And that's when we decided to really plunge and launch Relay, because we realized that none of the two networks on their own would have been capable of rewiring that delivery journey from collecting from the retailer's warehouse all the way to arriving to Claudia's doorstep to do that last bit of a delivery. So that's what pushed us.
And there have definitely been companies that have attempted to sort of rewire the infrastructure of how we get deliveries in the e-commerce sector, and they've failed. Why do you think they have failed? I mean, have you identified the reasons why and where they went wrong versus what you're going to do differently?
Yeah, I think and this was something that we really thought of a lot when wanting to launch Relay is, everybody just wants to do maybe a segment, a part of that supply chain. But to really, go up against the big incumbents, if you really want to compete with you can't just do one part of that supply chain. You cannot shy away from wanting to do that end-to-end delivery, from collecting from their retailer's warehouse all the way to doing that sortation, all the way to doing that doorstep delivery. You need to take on that end-to-end journey, because if not, you're not going to be able to really optimize every bit of the supply chain on the margins that you need to really compete with them at scale.
Yeah.
So that's where I think, we think about how did the others really go wrong, is that either they weren't really reinventing that delivery journey, which we can go into, Claudia, and, how do we do that delivery differently than everyone else? So they didn't really rewire that journey. They were
just replicating.
They were replicating what wasn't working, which is our theory and our hypothesis, and what we're actually proving out right now to be true, is that their delivery networks were built for B2B. And so new players, startups, were building that same B2B model that in our world is not going to work to power the future, with a lot less deep pockets than the incumbents. So how are you going to really compete if ultimately it's going to cost you more than the incumbents to deliver, and you're not reinventing that journey, or you're not taking enough of that journey? So example, at Stewart, we would only do that last mile bit.
Right.
So collecting from a hyper local location and then delivering out.
So the whole before part, getting it to a warehouse, that was not
part of the core remit. So you're doing parts of it, not all the chain, or you're replicating something that's not really fit for purpose.
So essentially what you decided to do was come in and compete with the giants like DPD.
Yeah, I mean, we still have a way to go, but we believe that we're building a model that, will be able to structurally compete with them. And we're seeing already early signs of being able to do that, where, we're already beating the biggest, some of these incumbents on their cost base, which will enable us to really scale out our service offering across the UK.
And I think that's a really interesting comment there, because obviously we know each other, so you have explained in detail how these various elements work. For just
a simple user who orders a package, it's like, okay, I've ordered my package. I'm going to wait for my email. It will tell you when it's hit the warehouse.
What actually happens when...
Like, you don't know exactly what happens.
Yeah, most people are shocked, actually, if they think about the parcel journey.
The logistics are crazy. You have to go through so many different steps.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you get your parcel, your ASOS parcel to your door, and you don't think twice about it. But actually, it's fascinating how many steps and how many things have to go right to actually get it.
That's right.
On time, intact.
That's right.
And, you know, without the stress, because obviously I think every single person can relate to a stressful delivery experience where they have been
absolutely
like, where's my package, and getting frustrated. I'm not going to swear, but, you know, getting frustrated with where's my delivery. And I think that's what was really interesting about the whole Amazon Prime model. We're like, wow, I can get something delivered and it's going to come in 24 hours. Like, I've run out of dog food. I don't want to go to the shop.
That's exactly.
It could come at 8 a.m. tomorrow. So I think there's definitely been like some really interesting elements to the whole life cycle of delivery. But break it down for the user that doesn't understand. Give me the steps.
Sure. No, and I think the way you touched on Prime is exactly what we're trying to achieve, is building a world, you know, a network that will be able to enable any retailer to offer their customers and consumers a Prime Now experience, because that's ultimately what people are looking for, right? But now we're in a world where 80% of parcels are still taking 2 to 5 days to be delivered, which is just so far away from consumer expectations, right? So if we think about why that is, if we just take a second to look at how the incumbents are powering that journey. Claudia places an order online. Let's say ASOS starts processing that order, picks and packs it, gets it ready along with lots of other end customers' orders, and then the delivery companies go and collect with a first mile operation those parcels, and then they have to take those parcels from the retailer's warehouse all the way to their central hub somewhere in the middle of the country to do a national sort. That's the first level of sort they do on a national level.
And they all have to go to...
They all have to go there so that they create that consolidation.
But even if someone lives really near where it's been packed,
so let's say
taken a journey.
That's right. So let's assume that, you know, there's a bunch of retailers that have their warehouses, let's say, outside of London because you ordered in London. That parcel is going to be collected just outside of London and go all the way up north to be consolidated with other parcels, be sorted on a national level, then come all the way back down to a depot.
So environmentally, that's a bit nuts as well.
Exactly. To be sorted again on a regional level. And then it has to go out on a courier run to go from the depot to a delivery area. And they will then deliver 150 parcels approximately in a van in your delivery area, which could be, 10 streets in an 8-hour van route. Now, naturally, if every parcel needs to travel, up and down the country or be sorted twice, and if every parcel needs to be collected via a van that is usually an hour out from their delivery patch, naturally, you're slower, you're more polluting and less efficient than what you could be if you would do it differently. So what do we do differently? We still collect from the retailer's warehouse because we cannot expect to change any processes for the biggest retailers, right?
Yeah.
So you still go and collect. What we do is we take it to our so-called hybrid sortation center. Why is it a hybrid? It's because it does that national sort and that regional sort under one roof. So it's as if we do just one sort.
So you're cutting out
We're cutting out a whole step. We do a regional and national sort under one roof into a deep level sort where parcels are placed into over bags. Imagine them like sacks.
Yeah.
One for lighter vehicles that could be mopeds or e-bikes, in the future even walkers, and one for cars. So depending on the mix of the parcels, the sizes, we would separate those smaller sacks for e-bikes and mopeds and bigger sacks for the cars. And then we run a middle mile operation that runs from our HSC, our hub, down to pit stops. And what are pit stops? They're actually hyperlocal handover points that replace the depot, that regional depot entirely. So it's as if we kill the depot in our step And it's not owned by us, the pit stop. It's a shared infrastructure. And what it is today, it's a parcel shop network. The way we go and place our returns, it's the same shops, but no carrier is using them for outbound deliveries.
So it's basically the same, say that I've missed my parcel and I get a note saying it's at the convenience store
That's the
down the
same
road.
network.
It's coming from the same place, which makes total sense.
Exactly. But we're able then, because it's so close to you, to use a completely different mix of courier fleet. All of a sudden, you don't need to use a van anymore that they were using to travel so far away from the depot to the delivery zone and to do those B2B restocking of pallets.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you can use e-bikes, mopeds, cars, walkers, a completely different mix, which makes you faster, more sustainable, more efficient.
And cheaper, presumably.
Exactly. So that's the whole, that's our USP, is going to retailers saying, look, there is a world where you can get a guaranteed next day delivery service. None of the 48-hour delivery, next day only, at the rates that compete with your standard delivery rates, and also having a more positive impact on the planet, where we can save up to 60% of CO2 emissions.
Yeah, I mean,
mile.
that's major, because, you know, the environmental piece, it's a hot topic right now.
But that's a triple win. They see that as, you know, I'm able to upgrade a service for my customers at the same price as what I was paying before and have a better impact on the planet.
That's incredible. That's amazing. So, but real talk, when you're building this kind of a company, the sheer amount of research that has to go into this, because if you're looking at competing on cost and timelines, what are the intricacies that you really have to look at? Because this is kind of what blew my mind in terms of like what size the package is. But what kind of things have you had to look at along the journey to improve that old archaic model?
Yeah. So, I mean, the V1, I think you can look at it in stages. I mean, the V1 before even launching was doing a lot of research and studies on how some of the Chinese players are doing it. So doing a lot of research on that, you know, dissecting their annual reports or quarterly reports to really go deep in figuring out that model and their capacity, their throughputs across the network, the topology of the network, how it was set up. So that helped a lot. But then when we think about, you know, the actual operation, we really used, you know, a lot of the learnings that we had from what we had built out from Stewart on that hyper-local fleet was ultimately what we were going to plug in to do that final 100 meters that we call from that pit stop to your doorstep. So a lot of the learnings were things that we already knew. And then it's about building in the layers of optimization across the entire supply chain. So our go-to-market strategy was fundamental for that, because we had to think, okay, in order to not burn as much money as possible, what is the optimal customer profile that we need to go after to win business in the early days? And that's when we realized, actually, we're just going to focus on small parcels to start, because that's how we're going to create the most optimal fill on that final mile. And so we thought about, okay, who has small parcels, might have a lot of cost pressures, so we can really make a difference with our rates and our service offering. Who has a high proportion of next day deliveries in the UK, right? So your ASOS is a good example. So that's what defined and shaped who we go after to help that optimization on, hey, how many parcels can we get onto that first mile vehicle to really fill it as much as possible? Because that's going to bring our price down. Then on that middle mile operation as well, the same knock-on effect on every step of the handover in the supply chain.
That's a lot to take into consideration and to really nail. Were there, and I say the early days, you kind of still are in the early days right now, but early days, okay, day one, and you've got to get your couriers and your parcels. Were there any moments where you thought, this is really, really hard?
I mean, I think the beauty for Jonathan and I was, I think it was almost harder before getting to, like, from from 1 to 10, we almost knew how to do it already, because that's what we did it. We really built Stewart from zero, from the ground up. So we had built that onboarding machine. It's when you're starting from zero, like literally nobody knows you, nobody knows who you are. You need to make that first hire and get that machine even up and running. That was, I think, the part of the journey where we felt most uncomfortable. Like already now, being 2 years in, feels a lot more known.
Yeah.
Based on things that we've learned from before. So that's helped us a lot. Now, in the early days, when you don't know anyone, you start with, friends and family networks, right? To get that first courier, might be you. It was us for a few, right? Then it's your friends, and then it's a friend of a friend. It becomes a real courier. And then you get that marketing machine going to help you. But yeah, that's how it started.
That's tough also, because whilst you're trying to build your team internally, you're also, an important thing to mention is that you're kind of owning the courier journey as well. So you're having to recruit.
Onboard, yeah.
And
onboard
onboard.
and vet them. Yeah.
Which is a massive, massive thing, because you're relying on people, and people are the most unreliable product. Has that been a challenge for you?
I think you're right in saying yes, that it's the most unpredictable, but I think there's a lot of things that can be done now through technology. So I think when we think about Relay, we think about us being a tech first business. So if we think about everything we've built in our courier app, is to almost think about it like your Instagram feed, where you really want to understand in depth what drives that courier behavior to accept a certain job, what's the right pricing, what slots go out first. So if those slots go out the first, then you can potentially price lower than other slots that take longer to be accepted. So there's lots of learnings that we're making through setting up the technology in the right way that enables us to make all those decision-making processes internally that drive a business impact. So that's been really, really helpful, building that strong technical layer from day zero to make all those learnings and tweaks.
So you can, in a sense, with your technology, the couriers can't just like go rogue and stop at McDonald's and have lunch for an hour. Like you can see.
We would see that. We would monitor that. And we've created almost like different levels of couriers. So you can go from platinum
like
to
an incentive.
gold, silver. Yeah. So you can grow within the network
That's smart,
to get
actually.
access to the best routes. So you get first dibs.
Yeah.
The higher you are in the rankings, right? You unlock bonuses. So there's lots of gamification that we've made around it to create it, make it exciting for them, right? Now, ultimately, I think if you put yourself in the position of any courier, like most people think about it, how can I make most money in the shortest period of time with my job not being a headache? So everyone thinks. So, we really take that seriously, and we really try to build a product that is able to accommodate for that.
I think, that's definitely a very good point. But I don't know the workings of other companies, but as far as I'm aware, there aren't real structure or programs for couriers where you can move up the ranks and where you can earn more money and you have a chance to earn bonuses. It's very much just a transactional thing. This is your job.
Right.
This is, you might get a tip. Yeah. So it feels, and maybe that's why they're protesting so much about their working conditions, because they don't have the opportunity.
Of course. And that's a major learning we made from Stewart, where, when we left, we decided, okay, from day zero, we'll implement the worker model for our couriers, which means that, they get to have the full flexibility to choose when to work, the length of hours to work, but we pay sick pay, holiday day pay, and pension pay on top for those hours worked.
For your couriers?
Yes, just for those hours worked. So it's the worker model, which was what the Uber ruling on the driver's side came to. So we decided to adopt that from day zero.
Okay, so that's definitely an attractive pull for couriers.
The way we think about it is that, our fleet, thanks to that pit stop being so hyper local, that enables us to really have a completely different fleet composition than your DPDs or your Everys. Because if you're a DPD and an Every, with that depot being so far, you can only tap into a certain type of courier.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in our world, we could tap into an Amazon courier, DPD courier, but also Deliveroo, Stewart, Uber couriers, because they can plug and play and dissect their day as they want. We wouldn't want them not to be doing their lunch and dinner peaks with the Deliveroo. They can put relay, in the mornings and the afternoons and still do their lunchtime and evening and maximize their earnings. That's how we've devised our runs to be able to split into smaller chunks instead of having to do a full 8-hour run the way you have to do on a DPD or an Every. You can cut that up and do 1.5 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours, and so on.
And presumably it's much easier for you to have insight and control over the process, because instead of a giant van picking up hundreds and hundreds of parcels and then within this 6-hour window, because you're split into areas, I know within sort of an hour or two when it's going to be delivered.
Exactly.
Okay. It's pretty genius. Remember, I don't know if I said this to you. When I first met you and you told me and you gave me like the spiel. I was like, someone just made me realize that the delivery and logistics industry can be quite sexy. You sexed it up.
That's great.
So I think for, a big piece of this is your technology. And that's really challenging for a lot of people because you can have the best idea in the world and great experience on the operational and commercial side, but it's tricky getting the tech right and knowing what calls to make and what technology you use or what add-ons do you need to build. How have you and Jonathan navigated the sort of tech aspect of this?
I mean, the reality is that to even get Relay off the ground, we didn't have the, investment at the time just to get launched and off the ground to spend on tech build. So that meant that, to get something off the ground as quickly as possible, we needed to get something off the shelf.
Yeah.
So V1 was literally operating with third-party technology to be able to even just deliver for our first pilot customer. Now, quickly after that, we started being able to raise with that MVP, and that gave us the foundation to then start building out that tech team. And I think what was great is that we tried to build a team that is a mix of the old world and the new world. So bringing together, people from the world of Stripe that have changed, our payment gateways online, the way we shop, to the team at Deliveroo that has all that knowledge and know-how of how to build that scalable tech platform from a courier and merchant perspective. All the way from a team from, people from Palantir, bringing those together with then the likes of people who've operated in the parcel world for 10 years, Every people, ex-DPD people coming together. And that's what I think makes the team really, really strong, because you're bringing different worlds together that can build the technical foundations of what the great product looks like. Having that technical capability to implement it, but then bringing the ideas of the old world and the new world together.
I think that's important, though, to have people in the team who know intricately how it did work before, and then the people who can innovate more. Not saying those other people cannot innovate, because they've clearly joined you because they wish to innovate.
Our CTO actually says it really well. He says, to break the rules, you got to know the rules. So that's the way I think we're thinking about disrupting, is knowing, understanding how it works and thinking about how could it be done better today.
Absolutely.
If you're launching a delivery business in 2022, you must be doing something completely different than if you launched it 50 years ago.
Yeah. And do you feel like there are any, because obviously you and Jonathan have a mixture of skills, but are there any key attributes, like character attributes, that you feel have given you the well, the strength and the bravery, because it's not for the faint-hearted. It's very, very, very full on. Are there any sort of key things about you that you feel you have as part of your makeup and your personality that mean that you can probably navigate the very choppy seas of this kind of industry?
Yeah. So I think, Jonathan and I, are very different and complement each other really, really well because we have such different skill sets and capabilities. But I think the biggest thing we have in common is persistence. The more we hear no, or the more we see something not working, the more we have the drive and the push to want to make it work. So I think that's the biggest trait we have together that helps us.
And then in terms of, are one of you maybe more risk averse than the other, or?
I wouldn't say that. I think the way we think about it, usually when investors ask us, it's Jonathan is more of the thinker and I'm more of the doer. So you need those two to go really hand in hand to do things right with the best information you have in the moment. So I think that's the way we see each other as the combo.
And does it work? Quite do you ever have disagreements about what direction to go in?
Of course, and I think that's natural. That's the way. We want healthy discussions even across the team. We don't want to build a culture and environment where everybody just gets on because one person that's the most senior has an opinion or an idea. We want people to have healthy data-driven discussions on how to take things forward. And yes, tensions might naturally arise as you're building something really challenging. But the important thing is that how you're navigating that conversation and coming to a resolution together. And
how was your fundraising journey? Because I've heard really different accounts of how people went around fundraising. Obviously, you guys have the CV of all CVs for this kind of startup, but what was it like and kind of what did it look like? How long did it take?
I think it was very, very difficult for us in the early days because we came to market actually when the 10-minute delivery companies were going down. Right. So that made our timing really, really difficult. So, we were piggybacking off of the examples of people raising, 20 million off of, not even a finished stack to the reality of, delivery is not having a very positive connotation right now in the market because these companies were not making any money on what they were selling, right? So that made it very hard. A, timing to market, but B, we've never really done fundraising before. So it was a very new process for us to navigate with a lot of nuances that we didn't know about. So I think what really impressed us is how nice and friendly the founder community actually is in wanting to help out and help you navigate that. So I think that was really, really helpful for us. Building out a network of founders that would help us navigate the next steps, because there's almost not like a fundraising playbook that helps you understand this is the do's and don'ts. This is how to go about it. I think that was the hardest period.
And did you have to hear some no's before you got your yeses?
So many no's, but also a lot of people that in the investor community that understood what we were doing and that are really confident in what we can achieve thanks to our backgrounds. And a lot of them just want to get to the point where you see those unit economics working so that you almost know, okay, at that point, it's a done bet. I'm willing to grow that out across the UK and not be in a similar position as to what they've seen in the past with the 10-minute grocery delivery companies.
So it was about finding that investor or those investors who were willing to take that leap.
Yeah, and those investors that are willing to go deep enough to understand the differences in the model. Because if you look at our network design and understand how our unit economics work in the model and how it's broken down, you would see immediately how different it is from an on-demand delivery capability that the others were building to deliver a 10-minute offering versus a whole day offering, which is what we do with next day, changes completely the dynamics of what you can achieve, right?
Absolutely.
The fewer time, the shorter lead time you have to deliver, naturally, the more it's going to cost you.
And what's your experience? And it may not be, you may not have even noticed this, so there's no right answer. But being a female founder, I've had so many female founders here, and they say they have very, very different journeys and stories. Obviously, you have a male co-founder, and really, if you just look at the statistics, your chances go way up in fundraising if you do have a male co-founder. Do you think your fundraising journey would have been any different as a sole female founder? No co-founder. Forget the skills that Jonathan brings, but do you think your journey there would have been any different or more difficult?
No, for sure. I think it would be very difficult. I mean, I oftentimes, wonder, like, female aside, being a sole founder must be, it already feels very lonely for most part, because you're just covering a role that is so specific as a founder. There's no one else other than your co-founder that you can relate to in that role. So I would find it personally very, very lonely to be a sole co-founder founder.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what was your fundraise? So we've talked about fundraising, but how much did you actually raise in the end?
So in total, we raised about 12.5 million. The latest seed round closed out at about 10 million.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Pounds? Dollars?
Yeah, dollars.
Okay, awesome. And have you kind of mapped out how you're going to use... I always wonder, when you get this large chunk of investment, have you kind of earmarked it in every way, or are there still like, okay, we've got this chunk of cash?
No, I mean, the plan is very clear. Now we're building out the network to be able to become the lowest cost delivery provider in the UK. So that's what we're trying to prove out, alongside really big growth ahead of Series A. So showcasing that we can achieve a 50x growth is going to be really, really powerful going into that Series A with really great unit economics.
And there must be a lot of investors who you had warm conversations
with,
who said
they're keeping their tabs. They're keeping the tabs.
Then they're going to be like fighting at the cap table.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, because you've proven the model can work.
Exactly, and I think what made it, let's say, easier in shaping those milestones from the seed to the Series A is that we've gotten a lot of consistent feedback. So we know what we need to do. We know what we need to deliver on. And now it's just about executing that.
And have you sort of gone through that point where you sort of like price per package and things like that?
Exactly.
So you've had your trial period and you've been able to prove the concept works. Yeah. So
now it's about scaling it out and proving that it's consistent on those numbers.
And I guess if it logistically works, that's when you might start seeing really big numbers, and not forget even just investors, but your client base in terms of the retailers that are going to use you.
Absolutely.
That must be like, I don't know who's your ideal client, like retailer? Who would you do a happy dance if you found out they were going to use you today?
I think we're really excited about, any retailer that has really small parcels. So anyone in, fast fashion, health and beauty with really those small parcels, that's our sweet spot.
Yeah.
That's really what we're going after now. What's, really interesting as profiles that we're thinking about is, how do you get closer to utilizing our network to do consumer to consumer deliveries, right? So we were talking about earlier the Vinteds of this world. So Nikki selling on to Claudia. That's where our network really lends itself well, because you can piggyback of our existing outbound operation, just bring those parcels back into the network and back out. And that's something that really sets us apart from the existing incumbents, because they decouple collections and deliveries. Meanwhile, in our network, we don't. They could be intertwined, a collection and a drop-off.
Yes,
could be
absolutely.
in the same run.
Yeah.
That's how we've modeled our technology to be able to have that flexibility to gain on those competitive edges that we have.
And do you quite actively do business development to try and get more clients? Or because it must be kind of the chicken and the egg sometimes a little bit, because you need to be able to have the capacity and the technology and the staff.
Yeah, but I think so. I think you always need to be, the sales team almost needs to think 12 months out, because the sales cycles that you're dealing with are long and can be long, especially if you're going after the enterprise segment, right? So I think, yeah, always have the eye on the ball for that business development to keep going. You always want that machine to keep going, even if sometimes there will be gaps where the operation is less ready. But then you'll have other gaps the other way around where the operation is ready and there's not enough demand. So you always want that. You want the demand to always be coming in so that you can almost stagger it when you want and you're in control of when to land it, rather than not being in control of when that volume's going to land.
Right. So like Selfridges comes to you and you're like, you're going to have to wait 6 months.
Exactly.
We'll add you to the waiting list.
Exactly.
That's
and
the
giving
idea.
them a start date is better than waiting to reach out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people say that you should strike while the iron's hot and jump on it if you get the opportunity. But with something that requires this much precision, you probably only have a chance to really get it right once. So it's better to tell someone, we'll have you in 6 months, and know that you're really, really ready for it.
Of course.
Versus absolutely, and sign a contract with them and go for it.
And things always, you need to, from experience, things always end up taking longer than expected. So, saying yes now and starting, legal contract might take, months before you close that out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can imagine with really large corporates, it's got to go
they're
through
just
so
slower.
many.
You can be as fast as you want, but if they're slow on the other side,
Yeah.
there's not much you can do.
Yeah. So this is not the easiest question, but what are your ambitions for Relay as a whole? Okay, someone asks you in 10 years, oh, you own or owned that company, Relay Technologies. What do you want people to say about you?
I think when Jonathan and I think about it, we think, we want to get to the point where we're the most beloved delivery company in the world, where people think, when they think of Relay, they think, oh, I have a great delivery experience. Like, it was smooth. It was seamless. I want Relay to be doing my deliveries.
And
a bit like what you said in your experience. You said, look, it was great. There's nothing wrong with it. It was a great experience. That's what we would want to hear.
And I think that's
across the board.
I think that's the important thing. Like when you have genuine passion with what you're doing, and it's not just a get rich quick. Well, this is definitely not a get rich quick scheme. This is like really, really process driven and long winded. But I think when you have that passion, I think it shows through versus the startups that we've seen emerge in this space or in other spaces where it was very evident they wanted to build quickly, exit quickly, and move out.
Yeah.
Versus this, where it's like, it's going to take time. We're going to have to go through some teething issues, but it's important. And do you have an exit strategy?
It can take so many different shapes and forms. I think right now we're so laser focused on building what we're building that we're not really thinking of, an exit right now. But there's so many companies that could be thinking about this, right? If you think about, Shopify wanting to make moves into the logistics play, it could be really anyone. There's so many. It could be a payment gateway wanting to do that. There's so many that are trying to move further down the chain.
Yeah.
Into delivery. Yeah. So it could take so many shapes and forms.
But it sounds like your ambitions are, not just the monetary side. You actually genuinely want to change the way that things work. And even if someone comes to you with a massive check tomorrow and says, I want to buy you.
Yeah, look, and maybe, that exit could be an IPO, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily that someone acquires.
Oh, we're thinking big.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that. Okay. And In terms of balancing, obviously you're in a high pressured environment and you're building an incredibly complex business. How do you, and we talked about this before, like, hey, have you had a holiday? No. Have you? No. How do you balance work and life? Is it possible? Because I'm hearing a lot of people give me the like, yeah, you just close your diary for 3 hours a day. And do you have a work-life balance? And do you think that in the early stages of building a startup that it should be that important?
Yeah, I just don't think it's realistic to expect to have a work-life balance when you're building out your own business. I think that there is going to be a time for that in the journey. It's just not an expectation that you can have when you're so early on in the journey. So yeah, I try not to think about it in that way. I try to think, in the few moments that I do have with, my partner, my friends, my family, to try and be present, even if it's, just a few minutes at the time, but those few minutes, try to just be me and be there, be authentic, be present. That's the best I can do for now. And yeah, even if that means that, I won't have a full blown holiday for another few years, that's just a part to play.
I guess you also need, if you've got a partner, a family, they do need to also buy into what you're doing.
Exactly. And they play a huge role actually in this journey, because without them, it would be, mentally very, very difficult to do any of this. So they're very bought in, and they are fully understanding of what it takes.
They're kind of like investors in you as well.
Exactly. And they know that this is the state of play, hopefully for something that will be worth it, which I'm convinced it will be. So they're part of it. They're part of that journey.
They'll get their pina colada on a Caribbean beach.
Exactly.
Someday.
They'll be part of the celebration. Yeah.
And is there any advice that you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur? Like I speak to a lot of people. I go to a lot of networking events, and a lot of them say,
what do they say?
I have this idea, but I don't know, it's risky, or I don't know if I'm capable of it, or like, is there any advice that you could give someone who wants to take the leap but hasn't quite taken the leap?
Right.
Any words of wisdom?
Yeah. I think that people underestimate how much they can learn in that phase before going full on and plunging in that discovery stage. So in that discovery stage, you can actually find out a lot by speaking to prospective customers. So I would really recommend to spend a lot of time on that, on those interviews, to speaking and finding that product market fit, understanding, because there's so many companies that you talk to that still don't have product market fit, even years in.
Yeah.
And I would find that scary, right? Like I wouldn't want to personally get invested or launch something that doesn't really have early signs of being able to have that product market fit. So for me personally, to take that jump, it was very important to have had those conversations with those industry people, with those retailers, to know that if I were to launch this, they would want to buy. Okay. That helped me a lot psychologically.
So like finding out the key facts and the market. I think that's smart though, because the amount of startups who have come out without product market fit.
It's just the idea. Yeah. But from idea to actually in practice, there's actually so much you can do with just an MVP. Like what can you do with really little money? There's actually a lot of things that you can do to get creative and try and show those early proof points.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think, what do I need to have put in place to put myself in front of investors?
Exactly.
And there's a lot of arguments saying you don't need anything, just do a really small pitch deck. And then there are people in the camp of you need to build something.
You need to build
like the skeleton of something.
Something.
Yeah.
Something
even for yourself, you're saying.
Yeah. Even for yourself, right? Not for the others. And yeah, in this environment, it's also really difficult to just go out with a deck and not show early proof of what you're doing, unless you are already a ex-founder that has exited a company and has done really well. Of course, people are willing to vouch for you on paper. But if you're not that, then there's a lot that you need to do to prove out that you can do it.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I've no doubt you're going to be a household name. You're going to be delivering for the biggest retail giants. So I wish you all the luck in the world.
Thank you.
Sounds like
Thanks for having me.
Sounds like you've got your ducks in a row and you're going places. So I'll be watching out, and I'll keep ordering.
That's great.
Getting my ASOS parcels.
Yeah.
It was a great experience for me.
Great.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Claudia.